guys, thanks for tuning in and checking out the Aggro Archetype Compendium. If you like my hard work, go ahead and like the video, comment if you have any other questions. Also, this is the first part of a 4-part series, so if the videos have already come out, you'll see them in the sidebar. You can go ahead and click them to watch some more, or subscribe if you want updates as to when more will come out. So after playing Aggro almost strictly for the last 7 or 8 years of my Magic playing career, I've decided to put a compendium of what Aggro is and how you can build it. Why do I want to do this? Well, there's basically, people view Aggro as like a one kind of play, and I want to clarify that there are many different types of Aggro. The Aggro is not just, you know, tap dudes and swing. There's actually a bunch of subtypes within Aggro. I wanted to make sure that Aggro players could learn more about the different feels of the deck and help them separate about these games and ideas. A lot of times people will suggest cards that are great for a Rush aggro, but awful for a Sligh aggro deck. And I want to clarify that there are some cards that work for different subtypes of aggro. And I also wanted to cut down on the idea that aggro is dumb. It's one of the biggest things that I hear constantly when people hear I play Zoo. They go, well, isn't that a dumb deck? Isn't there no thought required? And aggro actually has quite a bit of thought required to it. And I really do want people to realize that there is a science of thought process behind it. Yes, while we tap dudes down, it's also in play baiting, making better sideboard choices, and to make sure that we have the correct redundancy and the correct backup plans. How do you define aggro? This is a big thing. In order to actually move on and talk about what aggro is as an archetype, you need to understand what aggro is and what aggro is not as a larger super archetype. And my definition for what aggro is that aggro is a deck that aims to win through efficient spells and forces an opponent on a defensive immediately, and presses that advantage to win. Now, what does that mean in lamest terms? There's a couple different things, and then you'll see they're separated by commas. Aggro is a deck that aims to win through efficient spells. There's a lot of decks that try to win through efficient spells, but aggro wants efficiency to stand on its own. Not to mention, it's also now that it wants to force an opponent on a defensive immediately. Like, its goal from turn 1 is to make the opponent go back on their heels. At no point in time does it want to be the control. At no points in time does it want to combo out or to sort of gain leverage for the next turn. It wants to immediately put the opponent every turn further and further away from winning and further for them closer to winning. And that brings us to point 3, that it presses that advantage quickly to win. It doesn't dilly-daddly whatsoever. It just simply keeps pushing and pushing. So what is it not? It's important to realize what in that statement aggro isn't. In that respect, aggro is not combo, because combo does not use efficient spells. While together they are synergistic and can work towards a common goal, they are not efficient when you think about it. So for example, Pyromancer's Ascension and Storm. Pyromancer's Ascension, you have to charge up. It costs 2 mana and does nothing the minute it comes out there. You need to work around it in order to actually make it good. And once it starts doing its thing, it makes everything else efficient. But it is not an efficient spell in and of itself. And that is where aggro will differ from combo. It wants every spell to be efficient and help towards its goals of being aggro. Mid-range aims to be versatile. Now, this is a big thing as well. If mid-range aims to be versatile, that separates it from aggro. While mid-range can be aggressive, it also doesn't mind being a control in a matchup. It's very willing to switch shoes, and that's the big thing, is that it willingly trades aggression for the fact that it can do whatever it needs to do at the time and change on a moment's notice. Aggro does not do that. Aggro is not versatile. It has to attack. Control aims to control. Now that one's simple, but you gotta break it down. Control at no point in time aims to be the aggressor right away. Now it can against certain like combo decks if it needs to jump into the ability in order to start being aggressive. And it can, some control decks actually will be the aggro or the beatdown against other control decks, but the difference is it tries to leverage what it needs to do. It tries to control the field against an aggro deck or a combo field. It's trying to control the deck before it can do what it needs to do to win the game. It's not pushing them on their heels right away from turn 1. Ramp takes time to be huge. Again, it's dilly-dallying. It's going to take time in order to go, I'm going to ramp, I'm going to ramp, I'm going to ramp, now I'm going to be aggressive and win. Now it might use its ramp win cons aggressively to win, but it's dilly-dallying beforehand. tempo is the hardest one to think about, to separate it from aggro. Because you can start thinking about tempo as control aggro, but that's tempo. It aims to offset the opponents, to keep them off kilter long enough that it can win the game. Now, what that means is you gotta look at the very difference between for example, a Zoo setup versus a Delver setup. While Delver can be aggressive by putting out a turn 1 Delver, flip it, and start swinging for 3, it's going to probably protect that Delver. It's not going to add more to the table to be aggressive. It's not going to keep pressing that advantage. It's going to go ahead and try to be a little reactive with it. Likewise, a turn 1 play of Zoo's Bolt versus Blue's version of it, well, aside from Bolt, is a Serum Visions. It's aiming to set itself up. It does actually dilly-dally. It's trying to protect its stuff, while the aggro just wants to press its advantages and keep the protection up of its creatures dying by putting up more creatures. So there's a bunch of different styles of aggro, and that's what I'm really going to break down in this video, is that there are actually, in my opinion, 7 different styles of aggro that you can play. Now, all are distinct amongst themselves, however they can blend together. To quickly go over them, that's Rush, Sligh, Swarm, Toolbox, Charged, Tribal, and Suicide. Now these are terms, a lot of them I came up with aside from Sligh, but they, if you start to think about them, the terms really do describe the types of playstyle, and I'm going to get more in depth with it now. We have Rush aggro, it's going to be our first one that we talk about. This is pretty much what anyone thinks of aggro. They think of Rush aggro. It uses your hand to kill the opponent in as little time as possible. It's extremely rash. I like to put these decks in metaphors, and if you were to play this deck, it feels like you're a goblin, you're unfazed by your arm getting cut off, you're just screaming and you're attempting to kill the opponent anyways. Even with one arm, you still got a dagger in your hand, you're going to stab them to death. That is what Rush aggro feels like. It really doesn't care about its creatures, it doesn't care about its spells, it doesn't care about most of this thing. It's just got built-in redundancy, and it's going to just vomit everything and see if it can kill you in as little time as possible. What are the pros of this deck? Well, the pros are that it's super fast, and it's super explosive. That is the biggest pro that you can get of Rush. Just as the name implies, it's fast. It can dump its hand in seconds. Your other things are that it's got super efficient spells. For a lot of these Rush aggros, they'll run 16 to 18 lands most of the time because everything they have is a 1-drop. It's got a good curve in the fact that it doesn't actually have a curve. It's literally 1-drops, occasionally 2-drops. And it has built-in redundancy. Let's look at, for example, the modern equivalent of Rush, which will be Red Deck Winds of Burn. Almost everything in the deck says it deals 3 damage to the opponent. You've got your Lightning Bolt, which of course is the best version of that. Then you've also got Bump of the Night, which does 3 damage to the opponent. You've got Lava Spike, which deals 3 damage to the opponent. You've got Vexing Devil, which all intents and purposes basically says you'll deal 4 damage to the opponent. You've got Goblin Guide, who deals 2 damage to the opponent, but can add up to 6 damage very quickly. You've got a ton of other things. Skull Crack, Lightning Helix, Searing Blaze. These all basically say deal 3 damage to the opponent. Sometimes they have extra effects on it, but they're all redundancy. They're all just bolts. Otherwise, they're bolts plus, or they're a worse version of bolt, but still good enough that it deals damage to the opponent. That is redundancy, and Rush aggro has the most redundancy out of all aggro decks. Your cons to this, and the reasons why you might not want to play this deck, is it runs out of gas just as quickly. Literally, when you dump your hand by turn 2, you are out of gas. You are either hoping to win, or you're dead. Simply that. You're easily outclassed by other decks as well. Simply, as soon as turn 3 happens, you're generally outclassed. Your Goblin Guide not dealing that much damage anymore, especially if there's a 5/4 Tarmogoyf out there. Likewise, your Vexing Devil might on turn 15, when the opponent has nothing but removal spells, or a ton of creatures that can block it easily and win, it's not going to deal any damage. It's just going to be played and it's going to be gone. Not only that, but it's also hated out easily. Because of the speed that it goes at, it doesn't have time to have plays with the opponent. It just gets hated out. For example, red deck wins or burn might just be hated out by Leyline Sanctity. You might just lay Leyline Sanctity out there, you burn opponent, look at their 5 volts in hand and go, well, that was it, I can't do it. Likewise, red deck wins in Standard more often is usually very powerful at the beginning of Standard, but as more and more hate cards get printed, white life gain cards for example, then it just becomes nothing, it just becomes crappy again. Here's some format examples of the Rush aggro deck. Now, with these format examples, I've been trying to keep it as concise as possible and try to take 4 major formats and examples of each of them. Let's start with Pauper. Now, in Pauper, there's a pretty easy example, and it's the red deck wins. You're just literally putting out as many cards that can deal damage as possible. You'll notice that Mog Flunkies can be a 3/3, and it just attacks as a 3/3, but it wants a creature to attack with it, which is fine because you've got Mog Constrictionists, Mog Fanatics, a bunch of Mog things, and they all deal damage to the opponent, basically. Mog Fanatic is a good one. You don't really care. You swing with it. If they block and it's going to die, you go ahead and sacrifice it and hit them in the head for 1. That's generally what you're doing. You're not really pointing burn at creatures. You're just going to try to deal damage as fast as the opponent, which is possible. In Standard, we've got another reason for that. We've got Gruul Aggro, not so recent, or not so unrecent Standard. One of the best decks. It was the Gruul Rush deck, and that's exactly where the name comes from. It literally, you put out an E1, you Burning Tree Emissary into a Flint Hoof Boar, and you're just trying to pile in as much damage as possible. Very shortly, even in Standard, around turn 4, your creatures were going to get blocked and killed. But you already did enough damage that you probably could just finish them off with the Searing Spear. In Legacy, we've got and Modern, we have the sort of same deck. You have red deck wins burns, red deck wins burn. In Legacy, it's mostly a burn version. In Modern, it could be either red deck wins, it could be burn, it could be either or, it could be a hybrid of the both. And what it is you're just trying to rush it out there. I like Legacy's example, as it does a lightning bolt, and then eventually does Price of Progress, which should hit the opponent for about 6 damage, and then at the very end, it just starts sacrificing its own mountains to Fire Blast and finish you off. In Modern, you have Goblin Guide, Echelon the Great Revel, who's awesome, and a bunch of other cards that, like Helden Marauders, where you're going to put it out there, and even if it just only manages to do 2 damage, it's fine. That's exactly what you're trying to do. It's going to vanish anyways. So, you're just trying to get some damage in there. I've got 2 decks that I'm going to show you that are going to be the examples for the Rush aggro, and I think you guys are going to really like them. So here are 2 decks that I'm going to show you that are basically just very, very, very much so Rush aggro in a nutshell. The first one is, I think, the easiest to think about when it comes to aggro, and that's red deck wins. In Modern, I call it red deck wins, you can call it burn, it uses a little bit of both. All it is basically tap creatures, deal damage to the opponent's face, hit the dome. It's really as simple as that. Everything in the deck does that. Echelon of Great Revel deals 2 damage, at least if it gets removed. It can also swing for damage. Goblin Guide can swing for damage. It's a 1 mana shock, at least, on the beginning of your first turn, especially if you're on the play, but it can deal more damage over time, 4 to 8. Grim Lavamancer eventually is just a shock stick. He just shocks over and over and over again until he gets the job done. Vexing Devil happens to deal 4 damage, and if they decide to kill it, then whatever, that happens. More removal goes away from your Echelon and your Goblin Guide and your Grim Lavamancer. So, to round it out, we also have a lot of spells that say, this deals damage to the opponent. Flames of Blood Hand deals damage to the opponent, does not let life gain happen. Lightning Bolt deals damage. Searing Blaze deals damage to a creature and the opponent. Shard Valley deals damage to the opponent. Skullcrack deals damage to the opponent. Mountains are mountains. Lava Spike is going to deal damage to the opponent, as is Rift Bolt. While some of these can also deal damage to creatures, it doesn't really matter. They're probably going to go to the opponent. You are basically going to just vomit your hand and end the game. The second deck that I'm going to pull out is actually a deck called Shamanism. This one specifically is one that went on MTGO, and I think 3-1'd. It's by Pizap. He's an MTG Salvation user. He's basically the go-to guy for Shamanism. So if you ever have any questions about this kind of deck or want to hear more about it, go to MTG Salvation, check him out. And what it mostly is just dump your hand. Now, The reason why I chose this one, it also has a tribal infusion. I won't really get into the tribal infusion until later on when I talk about hybrids and when I talk about tribal, but it's just all you should know is that it dumps its hands, and it happens to use shamans as a vehicle to do so. Bosk Banneret and Burning Tree Emissary are ways to basically just get free shamans out there and just deal a crap ton of damage. You basically want to end the game with a Rage Forger by having all your dudes deal extra damage, and you don't really care if they die in the attack once a Rage Forger comes out. You probably did enough damage off the attack itself with Rage Forger's effect to basically win the game. Without further ado, let's check out those decks. This one we're a little lucky because it's going to be both a red deck wins. One side's going to have more colors than me, the other side, me, I'm going to be just mono red, but it does show exactly what I'm trying to do here. So Vexing Devil comes out turn 1 in order to try to put some damage in there. If he decided to take the 4 damage, I would have been okay with it. If he decided not to, that's fine too. He decides that he's going to go ahead and just let me keep it. And he's going to put his own Vexing Devil out, probably to block or something. Or maybe he's just going to think that, I don't know, that he's going to have some way to block it and it's going to be fine. Regardless, I'm going to basically ride this to victory. I'm going to go ahead and just deal, again, more and more damage as possible. I'm going to put down the Searing Blaze, knock him down to take away 7 life on turn 2. We're just going to rush everything out there, out of my hand, as quick as possible. Next turn, you'll see that I'm going to be able to put down the 3rd land. I'm going to have a Shard Volley, a Skull Crack, or Lightning Bolt, one of those 3 to play with, as well as another card in my hand that I drew, but I'm going to be just doing as much damage as fast as humanly possible. Again, just emptying my hand quickly. Now, again, I want to explain that there are a lot of decks that will do this, but are a hybridization between the two. For example, Gruul Zoo is a Sligh with a Rush sort of infusion into it, which doesn't mean that it's not Rush or it's not Sligh, but it's a little bit of both. Again, he's going to put out some stuff. It's going to deal a little bit of damage. I'm just going to still quickly ride this to victory, kill some of the stuff in his way. The only reason why I'm killing things in my way, I wouldn't normally do that, is just because this guy will deal 4 damage, whereas my bolt only deals 3. If it was a 3-3 or a 2-2, I would just let it go ahead and trade so I can use the bolt to the face. You don't really care where your spells are going. You're just trying to maximize your damage output as quick as possible. On turn 3, I'm going to be able to bring this guy down to 9, and then with a Skull Crack that I've also got in my hand, I'm going to be able to drop him down to even lower. He's going to go take some damage off of his own shock. I'm going to swing, again, Skull Crack him down to about 4, and then not only that, I'm going to be able to, even if I don't draw a card, deal 4 damage to him, deal 3 damage to him, have the land out there. I might have 1 card left in hand, but obviously by turn 4, my hand isn't completely empty. And of course, I'm going to untap, and it's just going to basically be the game. It doesn't even matter if I draw a land or if it's something bad. It doesn't matter. I could put down the Searing Blaze, deal 3 damage to the Goblin Guide, drop him down to 1, follow it up with a Shard Volley. Wouldn't really matter. It's just over. The game entirely is over. Not to mention, I still have the ability to attack with this guy and win the game. So it's turn 4 and the opponent is at technically a negative, let's see if I was going to maximize my damage output. He would be at a negative 3. Moving right along, I've got another deck to show off here, and this one is going to be Shamanism. I've taken this deck list specifically from the MTG Salvation forums from Pinaz, and he's the guy who basically does most stuff with the Shamanism. He does it on MTG Salvation and MTGO, and he wins some dailies with it. Regardless, Shamanism is a Rush aggro deck, but it also has a tribal infusion into it. So I'm going to be showing quite a few different varieties of decks. So while Red Deck Wins was more of a straight Rush aggro, this one is a Rush tribal aggro deck. Turn 1, I'm going to go ahead and commune with nature just because I've got nothing else to do here. I could bolt him, but I decided to hold on to it. I find a Fauna Shaman, I toss it into my hands. The idea is next turn, I'm going to go ahead and resolve a Bosk Banneret, which is going to allow all my creatures to basically cost 1 less, and then I'm going to dump my entire hand on turn 3. Again, just dumping it as quick as possible, rushing in, getting as much damage. Shamanism has a problem in the fact that it basically can dump its hand and become explosively powerful on turn 3. But the window closes around turn 5 to get that damage in. So, it is imperative that you manage to get that explosive turn 2, turn 3 play off. The deck I'm playing against is actually a pretty good deck. It's a pretty well-known deck. I believe it's Blue Moon, but it could be a Delver deck. In fact, I'm 90% sure it's just Red-Blue Delver, and a lot of my stuff is going to be Moderns, because that's the format I play the most in. But also, Modern actually has the most variety of aggros, in my opinion. Legacy has mostly Rush, or Toolbox, or Tribal, and that's about it. That's where it is. In Modern, there's a bunch of different types. So again, I'm going to resolve the Bosk Bananet. I think the guy held his Spell Snare because he thinks there might be some better things to grab off of it. Maybe he's going to try to do something with 2 mana. He wants to hold a Mana Leak. It also helps the fact that I've got a Cavern of Souls out, which is basically turning off his Mana Leak, turning off his Spell Snare. So, yeah, that's the real reason why he didn't play the Spell Snare, because I didn't let him, because I have the Cavern of Souls, which happens to be a tribal card. But the tribal synergies pretty much end as soon as you are. The tribal synergies in this deck are a vehicle in order to deposit your hands, and we'll go more into tribal synergies later on. So he's in fact the Delver of Secret decks. He's gonna pop out that Delver, maybe to block if he needs to. Hopefully it'll flip. He expects. And the reason, again, why this is tempo and not aggro is because he set up 2 turns with Grutaxian Probe. It's not really doing anything other than drawing a card. He's Lava Spiking, which is, it's aggressive, but he's really just trying to keep me off balance. That's why he's got Mana Leak and Spell Snare, with cards that basically, for all intents and purposes, do nothing until the game's over. Or until you know, something happens where they can become good. But it's not like if I just didn't play spells, they'd be dead cards in hand. So again, I just popped out 2 Elvish Visionaries for 1 mana each, allowing me to refill my hand a little bit with some more gas. And I'm just going to swing for 1. Still, again, I'm going to be aggressive. I'm trying to get as much damage in as humanly possible. Now, this was a pretty explosive turn 3 play because I was able to get the 1-3 and a 1-1 and a 1-1, but they're not going to stay that small forever. Again, his hand is pretty empty. It's not going to really be any good, but I'm about to go a little crazy on him. So I'm going to drop a Elfish Visionary here, a Fauna Shaman, and an Essence Ward. The one that I don't really care about here is an Essence Ward. My life is high enough that he's not going to burn me out anytime soon. So I care more about getting the Elfish Visionary out there uncounterable, as well as the Fauna Shaman out there uncounterable. You'll see I almost clicked doing the Cavern of Souls, but I opt not to, because I'd rather the Essence Ward get countered. Which it happens to get countered. So the Fauna Shaman sticks, and I'm able to swing for 3 now. He can block and lose his Delver of Secrets if he wants. If I lose an elf, I really could care less. But here's the trick that comes up with Fauna Shaman. If you guys don't know what the Shamanism deck does, it's just incredibly explosive as soon as it gets an online Fauna Shaman, or it has a Rage Forger. A Rage Forger is a 3-mana Shaman that comes out and puts a 1/1 counter on all your creatures, which allows them, whenever they attack, to deal 1 damage to the opponent. So I'm about to literally explode here. I put out my Forest. It's going to allow me to go off with my Fauna Shaman, ditch a Fauna Shaman, grab the Rage Forger, play the Rage Forger for just 2 mana because of the Bosk Banneret. All of these guys will get 1/1 counters. If I wanted to on the next turn, I could still get use Fauna Shaman again, get another Rage Forger to double out that damage output. And and it's going to be able to do a ton of damage right away, just being explosive. Again, I emptied my hand and I managed to draw 3 times off of the Elfish Visionaries. So I'm going to end on turn 4 with one card in hand, actually, and that's it. As you can see, they all get bigger. Swing. Lightning Bolt to figure it out. And the end result is he takes 12 damage total if he doesn't block, 10 if he blocks, which would drop him down to 2, and then plus 3 to bring him down to -1, and he's dead. If he didn't block the whole thing, he would just die, and he'd be at -3. So, it's one of the powerful techniques that you can do with Shamanism, is to just face it as a tribal and rush approach and try to get as much momentum out there as humanly possible. Sligh is the next aggro archetype that we're going to talk about, and it's going to be my favorite aggro archetype to talk about. What is Sligh? Well, Sligh was invented, a little bit of history here. Sligh was invented by a guy named Jay Snyder. However, he was the brains behind the operation. The muscle was Paul Sligh, and that's where the name comes from. During the Summer of Black Magic, where it seemed like Necropotence was the impossible deck to beat, Sligh came around and won in a weird idea, which was not just, let's just attack with as many creatures as humanly possible, as quick as possible, nor did it say, let's go ahead and eventually put out a big bomb. We're going to attack a little bit, until we put out Sarah Angel and destroy all your lands with Armageddon. Its idea was to basically do this. Why don't we have a good mana curve? Now, mana curve may seem trivial to you. It's one of the starting deck building ideas that you can play in Magic, but back then, it didn't actually really exist. It was just play good cards. It was very good stuff. So, Sligh was the first time that mana curve got brought into any sense of an aggro. Mid-range wasn't even a thing, really. And that's exactly what it does. It wants to have a good mana curve while winning off of the efficient creatures. That is, think Wild Noctowl, 1 mana 3/3s, while clearing the way for your attackers, whether it be burn, removal, terminate, path to exile, bolt, you name it. As long as it got rid of creatures out of the way, it counts here. How do you play? Metaphorically, how would one play Sligh? Well, you're not going to be a goblin this time. You're going to be a pressure cooker. You're going to put out your critters, and you value those critters as repeatable burn damage in this respect, so you don't want their arms to get cut off. You burn a path, they put out blockers, you burn a hole through it, you apply pressure each and every turn until they pop. What are the pros and cons of Sligh? Very simple. The pros are because it has a good mana curve. That is, it's got maybe 14 1-drops, 7 2-drops, 3 3-drops, and 1 4-drop. It's got a good mana curve. It curves into itself nicely. You're using your mana every turn, so that means you've got actually a pretty good mid-range. You value your creature quality over your creature quantity, and as such, it trumps other aggro decks, which is our second point. You put down a turn 1 Curd Ape, and they have two 1/1s that they put out on turn 1. That Curd Ape can eat both of them very easily, and they're not going to be able to swing into it easily, which is why Sligh trumps other aggro decks very often. It's also very removal resistant. While, don't get me wrong, removal still hurts Sligh as an archetype, because you're focusing again on creature quality, and you have enough redundancy to back it up, that one creature getting removed isn't the end of the world. You've got another creatures that are still going to do enough damage on their own that it's alright. Repeatable removal is a problem, and you'll see that. It's also harder to hate out. Unlike Rush Aggro, where you just try to apply as much damage as quick as possible, because it's got a good mid-range, because it's a little bit more versatile. Not a ton more versatile, but a little bit more versatile, and it also uses a little bit of different sort of like utility creatures, for example, things like Thalia, or maybe Grim Lavamancer, or any of sort of the white proactive hate cards that you can think of. It's going to be a teeny bit harder to hate out. Like, for example, life gain may destroy a Rush aggro deck. But here, because they're doing so much damage, and it's repeatable damage because it's your creatures, they can attack every turn, life gain doesn't nearly do as much damage to Sligh as it would against Rush aggro. Here are the cons, though. Speed is not the #1 goal. Now, to put that in retrospective, when I said that you gotta apply pressure, pressure and speed are not the same things. They're different. Speed is literally what speed sounds like. You are just trying to do anything possible as fast as possible. Pressure is different. Pressure is like threatening. You're going to play this down, you're going to say, I'm going to win the game with this unless you do something. And they do something, you go, that's fine. Here's another threat. They get rid of it, that's fine. Here's more threats, and you just keep laying down threats until they literally cannot react with it anymore, and then you win the game. And that's exactly how Sligh works. It also has a little bit of a lack of stack interaction. Because it's a little less fast, unlike Rush aggro, which tries to win before the stack is really that important, the lack of stack interaction is a bit more present in Sligh. You can have certain things, maybe proactive hate, which isn't really stack interaction, but you can maybe deal with things like instant speed burn or remove a creature, but that's pretty much the extent of your stack interaction. You're not going to be able to be very reactive and do extra things. It's also got a linear attack approach. Unlike a lot of other aggro decks which might have other outs, for example, Infect, really with Sligh you're only going to turn dudes sideways. There is really no other way to go about it. You've got so many cards focused on keeping creatures out of the way, keeping your creatures alive, keeping your mana good, having more burn that maybe goes to the face, that you don't have really any other approach to go, I'm going to add an Infect exponent here, or I'm going to have a plan B. It's just literally you're just going to attack and you're going to make your plan A as strong as humanly possible. Some format examples from the different formats that you can choose from. Pauper is a pretty easy one. You've got mono white weenies. White weenies is a little bit of a Rush aggro archetype, but it's mostly a Sligh archetype. You're going to be using different threats, and in Pauper, again, that's like Leonard or Sky Hunter. It's got evasion, it's a 2/2 first strike, so it's on curve. As well as removal. For example, in this case, it's going to be Journey to Nowhere. There's also things like O-Ring involved. And the Javeliers will basically be more removal while they're utility creatures, and you're going to go ahead and slowly win the game through that. In Standard, you've got a pretty dominant deck that became towards the tail end of Standard that it was at, and that was going to be the Innistrad Ravnica Standard, and that is going to be the Humans Naya Zoo deck. It's basically a zoo deck, but it uses humans. And it's going to be using things like Searing Spear to basically get rid of the opponent. Again, that's your removal suite, is a little bit of burn. You've got a bunch of beaters, as well as some utility creatures like Mayor of Averbrook and whatnot. Over on Modern's end, we got my favorite deck of all time, the Zoo. We're using the best cards that you can possibly use in this situation. You're going to use Lightning Bolt, Tarmogoyf, which is a huge beater, Wild Noctowl, which is the primo one-drop that you could possibly think of. And then over in Legacy, I've decided to add a weirder inclusion. It's going to be the Gate. The Gate is a mono-black archetype, but it is still using the fact that it's going to have removal. In this case, the removal is going to be things like Gatekeeper of Malakir. You can also use Dismember, as well as Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize, in this case, should be thought of as removal. You're using it to basically get rid of creatures before they even happen to exist, in this case. You've also got Vampire Nighthawk, which is an on-curve beater. A bunch of other cards that are just good, like maybe Abysmal Persecutor, which is an on-curve beater. So the Sligh aggro archetypes that I'm going to talk about here today are going to be another two modern ones. It's going to be Zoo, my personal favorite, as well as Mono Green Stompy. The Zoo deck is pretty easy to look at. This is one of my own building. It's a Naya Strictly example. It is basically saying that you're going to have 20 removal spells, 20 creatures, and 20 lands. Again, 20 lands are straight here. You can see that. The 20 removal spells are actually a little hidden. It's closer to 16 removal spells in this case. You've got the 2 Boros Charm, which can be double strike. It's also a little bit of a utility card. Lightning Bolt, Lightning Helix, Path to Exile. All these cards deal damage to the creatures, can be used towards the face as well, except for Path to Exile. Path to Exile is so good you sort of can't not have it, especially in a format that has nothing but like kitchen things all over the place. Moving on, there's also going to be Gorklan Rampager, who is Modern's equivalent into basically removal. You're just rampaging over Tarmogoyf or Luxodon Smiters, basically huge creatures. You're just going to rampage over them. So it counts as removal in this situation. Your beatdown crew is going to be a ton of 1-drops, things like Goblin Guy, Curd Ape, and Wild Noctowl, as well as you got a little bit of utility 2-drops, things like Qasali Pride Mage and Scavenging Ooze, who can still be a beatdown on their own. He is, for example, attacking on his own, a 3/3, so he's still undercurved. And then we've also got Tarmogoyf, who just beats down, and Luxodon Smiter, who again is just a beatdown, guys. These dudes are doing nothing but sticking around and beating down as fast as possible. So again, like I said, we've got a mix of beatdown dudes like Wild Noctowl. We got a bunch of survivability here to keep our dudes alive, like Boros Charm, and we've got removal like Lightning Helix and Lightning Bolt, as well as just the best mana fixing humanly possible in Modern. The mono green Stompy deck, this one is going to be by Christoph, I believe his name is. He goes on MTG Salvation as Huge Elf Boy. He is one of the guys who is the premier sort of mono green Stompy players. I believe he topped 8 in a Bazaar event with this list. As you can see, I'm just going to put out some aggressive attack here. Goblin Guide is going to be a little bit of a Rush Aggro card, but I want him to win a little bit faster in my Zoo deck, so that's why he's there. As you see, I'm going to keep him alive as long as humanly possible. And there are going to be certain times where I'm going to go out of my way to keep him alive, because I value his repeatable damage more than I value just letting something die. So again, swing here, got 2 mana open in order to keep the Gorklan Rampager available. If, for example, some crazy thing were to happen, like a Lightning Bolt out of nowhere, out of the Shimmying Spirit Guide, whatever. I just need to keep the mana open in order to make sure that I can Gorklan Rampager. He's going to drop down a Bitter Blossom, a card that I am not unhappy to see because he's a Fairies deck. He can do some cool stuff with it, but realistically, he's just going to basically lose 1 damage a turn. I don't really care about the chump blockers because that's all they're going to be. Even if you kept mana to do something like to counter spell, I have Luxodon Smiter, who is just basically an uncounterable dumb beater in this deck. So again, we're going to swing for more damage. Goblin Guide, being a 1 mana investment, has gotten me 6 damage so far this game, being an excellent aggro card. And I'm going to be keeping mana open in order just to do removal. If there's something crazy that I need to do, if I need to pump pump him up with Gorklan Rampager, I can. I've got the removal here, and again, the best mana fixing is all I'm focused on with my mana. There's really no utility in there, no Kessig Wolf Run. Horizon Canopy is the only thing I use, and that's because it can still mana fix me very well. And I don't really care about my life total all that much. My life total in Zoo generally doesn't go down past 14. That's just your general life total, and you do it so that you can get more damage in. I choose to possibly get him on a counter spell by putting out Luxodon Smiter next turn. It still leaves me with the ability to Lightning Helix if I have to his face, or kill off a creature if it's going to be huge. Maybe he's going to go ahead and do something like Click Band somehow, so I'm going to go ahead and keep mana open in order to protect my creatures. Basically, this means, and I think what I was really worried about in this case was a Vendilion Click, who is from Larwyn and is one of my favorite clicks. Even though they're annoying, I could even name them out to you, but I'm not going to. And that I'm just basically keeping it open, so if he decides to try to rip the Gorklan from my hand, or the Vines of Aster, which I drew, I'm going to be able to go ahead and burn it in response. If he decides to put it out right now, I'm still going to burn it in response. Or I can just Gorklan Rampager right now while I'm attacking. The better option is just to Lightning Helix right then and there. Of course, there's the Vendilion Click, like I expected, and of course it's going to get burned out of the way. He's going to decide to use it on himself. That's something you got to remember with Vendilion Click, is that you have to wait until they target something so that you don't get it confused and reveal your hand for no reason. Sometimes you've got nasty players and will try to trick you on that. But I'm going to go ahead and wait for that target to go through, and then I'm going to go ahead and Lightning Helix it. He's not going to be able to block now. I'm still going to get at least 2 damage in, which is perfectly fine by me. The other thing that I can do is I can also Gore Clan here, especially now that he didn't target my hand and rip that out. So I'm just going to Gore Clan whatever he blocks here in order to make it survive and maximize my damage output. It still leaves me with 1 mana open for a path if I need to go ahead and kill a, which I wouldn't have had if I Lightning Helixed, in order to protect again. So again, the Gore Clan Rampager there was just a little bit of removal, burning my path to clear it, as well as protecting my creatures. It's a little simultaneous action. That's not something that you're going to find in Rush Aggro, because the idea is just to value your creatures, and as you can see, I'm valuing my creatures here as much as humanly possible. So here I'm going to try to put out some more damage output by putting out the Goblin Guide. Even if he goes ahead and sprites it and just decides to double block on my Goblin Guide, it's okay at this point because I'm still going to be getting in 2 damage, and he's at a low enough life total I can be a little bit like that. I've also got Vines of Vastwood to pump if I need to in order to protect it from removals. If he blocks like this, that's fine too. I don't have any way to Rampager over, but again, like I'm saying, as I'm forcing him back on his heels, I'm saying you have to do something about this or you're dead. He's trying to get up to the Batterskull, and it won't end up working out for him because I have the Path to Exile. And he's also, because of this, he's already got a clock. I don't need to force the clock because he's already put himself on a clock, because he's going to be losing 1 damage turn. All I got to do is just not die at this point for six turns and make sure that he has no creatures on the field, which is easy with Zoo and all these burn spells that I have. In fact, I'm going to go at this point, this is where the burn can also be turned to the face and just remove the opponent, and I have 2 different options to win here. I can Path to Exile and kill his Batterskull token, swing, I'm going to be doing 2 damage to him. He'll go down to 1 and lose the Bitter, and the Bitter Blossom will kill him, or I can go ahead and bolt him right then and there. Either way, it's doable in the mana that I've got. I could dodge any of his removal spells, even if he were to try to Sour of Temptation. I could just Vines of Vastwood in response, or I could kill the Sour. I've got bigger beaters. I've got a ton of different options here, and that's exactly what Zoo and Sligh wants to do. It wants to use that good mana curve, protect its creatures because it values it, use its burn as removal and to hit the face, as well as have the best mana fixing possible. Moving right along, let's look at the Mono Green Stompy. This is a pretty quick game. Mono Green Stompy focuses a little bit less on removal and a bit more on protecting its creatures, as well as having a bit more of a stable mana base. In this case, it's just of 1 color, so you don't need to worry about anything. Just play lots of forests, basically. And I'm just going to be aggressive here. That's all I need to do is be aggressive. I do end up using the pump spells here have double duty. They can be used as protection against things like bolts, as well as they can be used as basically they can also be used as removal. I attack, something big blocks it, and then I pump it in response. The difference is that it doesn't allow the creatures to deal damage. It just has a lot of damage output. It's like, in this case, a giant growth on a creature with like the Dryad Arbor can deal up to 5 damage. So it's a bit more damage than your average bolt would be able to do. I'm just going to fast forward this in order to like speed up the process and explain things as it happens. So he's going to Pillar of Flames, and all I'm going to do here at this point is Giant Growth it to keep my creature alive. I've got enough to eventually put out these Leatherback Behemoths, or Baloths, and eventually win the game off of those alone. And I'm going to go ahead here, and now I've just put out the Leatherback Baloth. I'm eventually going to win the game off this. I'm going to keep swinging. I'm just going to keep trying to put out more damage output. He's going to try to do what he can. I've got the Vines of Vastwood to either end the game or just go ahead and remove Spellskite. I'm going to end up holding it because it's fine. They all die anyways off of those blocks. Again, I'm putting out constant pressure. I'm not necessarily rushing the game. We're already here around turn 4, turn 5. And now I'm just trying to put the game out there. And this is the end of the game. I'm going to deal enough damage. There's no way that he can possibly block all my creatures again. I put out a choke. This was a sideboard game to basically end the game. And you got a little bit of better utility when it comes down to Sligh.